Okay, so we're going to continue with 8.6 on law of cosines. The first part was on law of sines. Again, law of cosines, this is when, for triangles that are not right triangles. So similar to what we did in the previous lesson, when we didn't have a right triangle, we could use law of sines, create a proportion, and solve for the missing either angle or side length. So when we did law of sines, just a reminder, what we specifically needed was an angle and side opposite each other in order to use that. So if you have an angle, so just a quick look back. So like, for example, just on the previous page, we had an angle 111 and we had a side opposite 50, right? So when we don't have that, we could perhaps use law of cosines. So one scenario is, let's say you know two sides. So let's say this is 10 and this is 12 and the included angle. So we could say maybe that's 50 degrees. Okay, so this is a case where we can't use law of sines because we do not know a side and an angle opposite each other. The second situation would be, what if we know all three sides? So let's say this is 10, 12, and this is 8. Okay, so when we don't know any angles, but we know the three sides, we can use law of cosines. Okay, here is the formula for law of cosines. So again, this is for any triangle where A, B, and C represent the side lengths, opposite angles A, B, and C, respectively. So you'll see there are three formulas, but it's really all one formula. Okay, so it's going to be one of the sides squared equals the other two sides squared added together minus 2 times those two sides B and C times the cosine of A. What you want to make sure is at the ends, those would be the sides and the angles opposite each other. Okay. Just a quick note, whenever we have three sides that are given, start with the largest side and find the angle opposite. We'll look at an example of that. Okay, find the value of x, round to the nearest 10th place. So again, let me just write down the formula and I'll show you how we're going to adjust this formula for this triangle. So in this case, I'm trying to find x. So think of x as our a squared. The other two sides are b and c. So this would be 9 squared plus 11 squared minus 2 times 9 times 11 times the cosine of 28. So remember what I said when we were looking at the two ends, those are opposite each other. Okay, now to make this a little bit easier, we're just going to plug all of this into our calculator at once. So let's take a look. So I have 9 squared plus 11 squared minus 2 times 9 times 11 times the cosine of 28 degrees. I'm going to press enter. So I'm going to get about 27.17. We don't care what the exact answer is because I'm going to ultimately take the square root of that. So I'm going to get x equals, now in order to get our most accurate answer, I'm going to do control x squared. That's going to be my square root. And I want to take the previous answer. So I'm going to do control and the negative sign. And that will take my previous answer, I'm going to press enter. And we want to round to the nearest 10th place, so we're going to get 5.2. All right, let's take a look. The next one, I have all three sides. So again, I'm going to kind of identify the angle that I'm looking for and the side across from it. So this is going to be 8 squared equals, now here are my other two sides. So it's going to be 3 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 3 times 6 times, now I want my cosine of x. Okay. Now, what I'm going to have to do is I am going to have to isolate cosine x. Now, because I'm trying to find the angle measure, I know I'm going to have to use cosine inverse at the very end. But I have to really pay attention to order of operations here. So let's take a look. This on the left side, that's going to be 64. We get 9 plus 36, so that's going to be 45. Minus 2 times 3 times 6, so that's going to be 36 cosine x degrees. Now, do not subtract 45 minus 36. That is not using order of operations because 36 is being multiplied to the cosine. So first thing I'm going to do, let's subtract 45. So that's going to give us 19 equals negative 36 cosine of x degrees. Now I can divide both sides by negative 36. So I have negative 19 over 36 equals cosine x degrees. Again, remember I had mentioned cosine inverse is required because we need to find the angle measure. So I'm going to do cosine inverse of negative 19 over 36 equals x. So we get x equals 121.9 degrees. All right, here again. Here are the angle and the side opposite. So this time the side is going to be x, that's what I'm looking for, equals the other two sides squared minus 2 times 15 times 19, again just going back to that formula, times the cosine of the angle that was across from x, so that's 125 degrees. Whenever you're looking for the side, it's actually easier because all I need to do is plug this all into the calculator again. So I have 15 squared plus 19 squared minus 2 times 15 times 19 times cosine 125. Okay, so I get about 912.9. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we are ultimately just going to take the square root of that answer that we had on our calculator. So I'm going to do control x squared, control negative, and we get about 30.2. All right, next one. This time I'm looking for the angle. So the side opposite is what I'm going to start with. I have 3 squared equals 4.5 squared plus 6.1 squared minus 2 times 4.5 times 6.1 times the cosine of x degrees. So this is actually going to look very similar to the one directly above it because I'm trying to find the angle measure. So we're definitely going to be using our calculators here. Here we get 9. And then we'll do 4.5 squared plus 6.1 squared gives us 57.46 minus, okay, we're going to Then we want to do subtract 2 times 4.5 times 6.1. That's going to give us 54.9 times the cosine of x. So just like previously, we're going to subtract the 57.46 first, which gives us negative 48.46 equals negative 54.9 times the cosine of x. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 54.9. Running out of room a little bit. So eventually I'm going to be taking cosine inverse of that ratio to figure out what x is going to be. And I canceled out the negative because it's negative over negative. So I'm going to do cosine inverse. I like to do control divide just to make sure. 48.46 over 54.9. And we get 28.03. So x equals about 28 degrees. Okay, last page. So we talked about in the previous lesson solving triangle ABC. That just means we need to find all the missing angles in the side lengths. So we'll notice here we have each of the sides. We have side A, we have side B, we have side C, but we're missing all the angle measures. Now I mentioned when we have all three sides, we're going to start with the largest one. So I'm going to start with angle A and side A. So I have the side, that's 15 squared, equals, now it's the other two squares, 12 and 13, minus 2 times 12 times 13 times the cosine of A, because the angle A is what I'm looking for here. Okay, 15 squared is 225. 144 plus 169 is 313. And 2 times 12 times 13 is 312 times cosine A. Again, make sure we're following order of operations. We have to subtract 313 from both sides. So we get negative 88 equals negative 312 times cosine A. We have to divide 312. So we get 88 over 312 equals cosine of A. I'm finding the angle measure, so I know I'm going to have to do cosine inverse. So on the calculator, we will do cosine inverse 88 over 312, and I get 73.6. So angle A is 73.6 degrees. Now I have to find all the other missing angles, which means B and C. Now it doesn't matter which one we go to next. Let's say I want to find angle B. Well, now that I have an angle and a side directly opposite, I can actually go to use the law of sines. So I'm going to use sine of 73.6 degrees over side A, which is 15, and then I'm going to do sine of B over 12. Now I could use law of cosines a second time, but because law of sines is much easier, it's just a proportion, cross multiplying, this is what I'm going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 12. So I have 12 times sine of 73.6 degrees over 15 is equal to the sine of B. Again, I'm trying to find the angle measure, so I am going to do the sine inverse of all of what we have on the left side. Now we want to be really careful when we plug this in In the previous lesson, I had noticed some of you were getting incorrect answers because it was how we were typing it into the calculator. So we're going to do sine inverse. Now I'm going to make a division sign. So I'm going to do control divide, or sorry, fraction. So I have 12 times sine of 73.6 over 15. I want that whole thing over 15. So I get 50.1. So that's going to be angle B. Well, now that I have angle A and angle B, C is easy to find because we know all three angles have to add up to 180. So if I just do 180 minus 73.6 minus 50.1, I will get 56.3 degrees. Okay, last one. Again, we're going to solve the triangle XYZ. This time, let's see what we have. Let's see, we have side Y, we have side X, and we have angle Z. So first thing I'm going to do, we're going to pair up those two opposite parts. So I know I'm trying to find Z squared first. It's going to be 8.9 squared plus 9.9 squared minus 2 times 8.9 times 9.9 times cosine of 63. Okay. We're going to plug all of that in the right side into our calculator. So go ahead and do that. You can pause it or just double check to make sure you get the same thing. I get about 97.2. Again, in the calculator, don't use your rounded part. We're going to use that previous answer. Now, some of you might ask, could I just do the square root from the very beginning? Yes, you can also do that. And then we should get our answer, which will be 9.9. Okay, now that I know an angle and a side opposite, now I'm going to refer back to law of sines. So I'm going to do sine of 63 degrees over 9.9. And it doesn't matter which one I go to next. I'll go with X. Okay, so we'll do sine of angle X over 9.9. Now, what do we notice here? Those two sides are the same. So what do you think, even if we went through this whole process, we're going to get for angle X? We're going to get 63 degrees. You can confirm that, but again, you can see the proportions have to be equal. And then if we have, this is 63 degrees, we have an isosceles triangle, so we can just do angle Y, 180 minus 63 is 54 degrees.